Hello everyone. This video is brought to you by the Seventh Monk. This is lecture 2 of unit 3, determination of income and employment. In the last lecture we did the difference between classical, neoclassical and Keynesian theory of determination of income and employment, and I told you the grounds on which Keynes criticized the earlier theories and made his own theory. So, in this unit, we will be learning about Keynesian theory in detail. Before that, we should know some keywords. So, the first keyword is full employment. It is a situation in which all those people who are willing and able to work at the existing wage rate get work without any difficulty. So, if you have some required skill set, right, and you want to do work at the going wage rate and you get work, then that will be the situation of full employment in the economy. Now, what if you have the existing skill set, you want to do work at the going wage rate, but you do not get the job, you do not find the work? Then it means there is involuntary unemployment in the economy. So, involuntary unemployment is a situation in which all those people who are willing and able to work at the existing wage rate do not get work. So, full employment and involuntary unemployment are opposites of each other. In the situation of full employment, people are getting work, right, at the going wage rate, but in involuntary unemployment, they want to do work at the going wage rate, but they do not find work, right? Then the next important term is effective demand. Effective demand refers to the level of aggregate demand which becomes effective because it is equal to aggregate supply, right? Later on, when we will study aggregate demand and aggregate supply in detail, you will find that the point of equilibrium at which aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply, at that point your demand is effective. Okay, the aggregate demand at the point of equilibrium is called effective demand. We will do this in detail later on in this video, where we will do equilibrium of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. For now, just remember that at equilibrium, aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply, and the aggregate demand at the point of equilibrium is called effective demand. Alright, the next important term is ex ante saving. Now, what is this ex ante? See, ex ante means what we plan, okay, and ex post means what actually is there. So, ex ante saving means what we plan to save during an economic year, during an accounting year. You all know that an accounting year starts with 1st of April and it moves till 31st of March, right? So whatever you are planning to save during an accounting year is called ex ante saving, and the planning is done prior to the commencement of accounting year, right? So ex ante saving is decided prior to the commencement of the accounting year. Then ex post saving is the actual saving, okay, what actually is happening, right? So it refers to the actual saving in the economy during an accounting year, that is on 31st of March. What actually we have saved is the part of ex post saving, is accounted in ex post saving. So ex ante saving is accounting for what we are planning to save in an accounting year, and ex post saving is accounting for what we have actually saved during an accounting year. Then the next important term is ex ante investment. So ex ante means plan and investment means capital formation. So what we plan to invest during an accounting year is a part of ex ante investment, and ex post investment is the actual investment at the end of the year, that is on 31st of March. These terms usually come at 1 markers in your exam, so they are extremely important. So remember all these terms, right? They can be asked in the form of MCQ or as 1 markers, right? This full employment and involuntary unemployment are often asked. So here don't forget to mention each and every key point. Here you have to write that they are willing, they have the abilities to do that work, right? They want to do that work, they have the abilities to do that work. But here in case of full employment, they are willing to do the work at the going wages, and wage rates and they get work, but in case of involuntary unemployment they do not get work. Okay, you have to mention all these key points, right? Then and only you will get good marks, right? So here these two terms are extremely important. Sometimes effective demand is also asked. At some instances ex ante saving and investment, ex post saving and investment are also asked. Now let's move to the main subject matter of this video. Here first of all we will learn about aggregate demand in detail. We will do its components, its curve, its schedule, everything. Then we will do aggregate supply in detail, its components, its schedule, curve, everything. And then we will come at a common point, that is we will move all these things that we have studied, that is aggregate demand and aggregate supply together. We will bring them together and then we will find equilibrium, right? And then we will see why equilibrium is good for the society, what will happen if there is disequilibrium in the society, what is inflation, what is deflation. We will do it in this video. Inflation and deflation I'll be covering in a separate video, but here I'll be telling you the consequences of disequilibrium and the equilibrium. Okay, there are two methods for it. We will be covering both the methods in this video, right? And it is extremely important from exam perspective because the questions are asked from equilibrium part as well as a part of aggregate demand and aggregate supply as well. So I guess that this video is the most important video of this entire unit, because one question for sure will come from this part for as a 6 marker or 3 marker or 1 marker, but it will come. Okay, so that's why it is extremely important. Now let's start with aggregate demand. See, aggregate demand or AD refers to the total volume of goods and services that are demanded in an economy in a year, by an economy in a year. So you know that an accounting year is from 1st of April and it is till 31st of March, right? So whatever the volume of goods and services that an economy is demanding during this period of time is called aggregate demand, right? Now you all know that whatever you are demanding, you will do expenditure over it, right? If you are demanding an ice cream, then you will pay for that ice cream. If you want a piece of land and you are demanding that, then you will have to do a payment for it, right? So it means that whatever expenditure that you are making, right, is what you are demanding, because you will make expenditure only on those things that you want, that you are demanding, right? So the total amount of expenditure that is incurred by the community on purchase of goods and services is aggregate demand, right? So aggregate demand and aggregate expenditure means the same thing. Okay, is that clear? The other name for aggregate demand, which can be used in certain cases, is aggregate expenditure, right? Because whatever you are demanding, you are doing expenditure over it. So remember, aggregate demand is the total volume of goods and services that are demanded in an economy in a year. All right, now let's see what are the components of aggregate demand, who is doing this demand, right? So majorly the demand for goods and services is either for consumption or for investment. Now who makes this demand? This demand is made by private sector in the form of household or firms, or government sector, which is also called public sector, and by foreign sector, okay, that is rest of the world. So these three sectors make demand for goods and services for either consumption or for investment. All right, so the major components of aggregate demand are total consumption and total investment. Total consumption includes the consumption done by all these three sectors, and total investment includes the investment done by all these three sectors, right? So household or firms are doing consumption, private consumption, okay? So the main part of private consumption is done by households, because firm do very less consumption, okay? And the major part of private investment is of firms, because households rarely do investment. The major investment is done by firms. Households also do investment, but not more than what firms do. So the major contributor in private investment is firms, okay, are firms, but the major contributor in private consumption are householders, right? And then we have government demand and purchase, the next component, which include the consumption and investment that is done by the public sector, and the foreign sectors consumption and investment expenditure, that is the aggregate demand for consumption and investment of foreign sector, is accounted in the form of net exports, right? So if a question will come to you asking about what is aggregate demand and what are its components, you can easily and in very lucid language mention first the definition of aggregate demand, that it is the total volume of goods and services demanded in an economy in a year, and then you can mention all the components that I told you just now. Okay, you can make this flow chart also to supplement your answer, right? That aggregate demand for goods and services is either for total consumption or for total investment. So the two major components of aggregate demand are total consumption plus total investment, which further include, so consumption is including private consumption with major contribution of householders, then government or public consumption, and after that the consumption of foreign sector. Similarly, investment is private investment, public investment, and then the investment done by foreign sector. So here you can see I have explicitly mentioned over here numerically that aggregate demand is equal to total consumption plus total investment, right? And the main components of aggregate demand are private consumption expenditure, private investment, government demand or purchase, and net exports, right? Here you can see private consumption expenditure is including this parts where householders are the major contributors. Then private investment expenditure is including this part. So this is the first part, first component. This is the second component, right, that you have to mention in your answer. And here firms are the major contributor in private investment. Then we have government demand and purchase, that is including the consumption and investment done by government sector, and then net exports, which is including consumption and investment done by foreign sector, right? We have net exports for accounting it, right? So I hope that the components of aggregate demand are clear to you. Now let's discuss about all these four components in detail. So the first component, as I told you, is private consumption expenditure, and I also told you that consumption is mainly done by householders, not firms. Firms rarely do some consumption expenditure. Okay, so it is also commonly called, this one is also commonly called household consumption expenditure, because the major contributor over here is household, right? Here we are discussing just about this first, right? So it is a most important component of aggregate demand, and it refers to the total amount of expenditure that is incurred by households on purchase of goods and services to satisfy their want. And according to Keynes, consumption expenditure mainly depends on country's income and propensity to consume, right? We will discuss about propensity to consume later on in the next lecture, but for now just remember that people will consume in relation to their income and how much is their capacity to consume or their propensity to consume, right? So private consumption expenditure is including the consumption expenditure of the entire country, so that's why it depends upon two important factors, that is national income, the income of the entire nation, and propensity to consume. Propensity to consume, here in simple words for now you can remember it like the capacity of people of the economy to consume. Okay, we will do propensity to consume in detail in the next lecture, but for now, for the sake of simplicity, in layman language you can understand it as a capacity to consume. Okay, further you will know that it is more than it, right? But for now just remember that private consumption expenditure depends upon income and the capability of consuming. Suppose your income is 10,000 and you need ice cream, right? But your want is only of 2 ice cream. Having 10,000 doesn't mean that you will consume the ice creams up to the amount of 10,000. You have to see your capacity as well. Okay, you require only 2 ice creams, then why to waste money on buying so much ice creams, right? So it depends upon both the things. Now suppose if you have only 5 rupees, right, but your capacity is having 2 ice creams, right? And one ice cream is of rupee 5, so two ice cream will be for rupees 10. Then you cannot consume two ice creams there, you have to satisfy yourself with one ice cream only, right? So private consumption expenditure is dependent upon both the things, income as well as propensity to consume. Okay, you have to consider both the things while calculating private consumption expenditure, right? After that we have private investment. So I told you that investment is mainly done by firms, but households also do some sort of investment. Okay, so private investment refers to the total demand for capital goods by private entrepreneurs, and in Keynesian analysis, investment means creation of new capital assets such as plant and equipment, construction work, etc., which help in production. Right, so here we will not include the household investment, here we are including the investment that is done by firms, okay, which is helping in further production. Okay, so all the investment that are done by private entrepreneurs are the part of private investment which are helping in further production. Okay, and remember that this private investment expenditure, this private investment is of two types. One is induced investment, okay, and another one is autonomous investment, right? Knowing this is extremely important, although you won't be asked separately about these components, but when there is a question that is asking you about the components of aggregate demand, then mention all these things, because if you will mention all these things, then automatically there will be a good marking, right? Because your answer will have all the value points, right? So I told you that private investment is of two types, induced investment and autonomous investment. Knowing this is extremely important for one more thing, because if you know what induced and autonomous investment is, then drawing the graph of aggregate demand will be very easy for you, right? So see, induced investment depends upon the level of income. So if your income will be more, suppose I have mentioned income on x axis, right, and I have mentioned investment on y axis, right? So if your income is more, then your investment will be higher. Your income is more, your investment will be higher, right? Income is more, investment will be higher. So induced investment depends upon the level of income, right? It increases or decreases with simultaneous rise and fall in national income, and this type of investment is mainly done by private sector, right? They do more investment when they have more income, they do less investment if they have less income. Okay, so I hope that induced is clear to you. Induced depends upon the level of income, and it increases or decreases with rise and fall in national income, and it is done by private firms. Now let's move to autonomous investment. It is independent of level of income. It is determined by autonomous factors like population growth, change in technology, discovery of new resources, etc. So since it is not dependent upon level of income, hence it is a straight line. Even if income is more, the investment will be same. If income is less, then also investment will be same. Income won't affect the level of investment over here. Okay, remember this. So it is independent of level of income, right? So if there is more population growth in the country, automatically the country will do more investment to sustain all those people, right? All those new set of population. The investment in the economy, the will be high, right? The government will plan to invest more. Whether it is able to plan, it is able to do more investment or not, it depends, because more population also mean that we require more consumption expenditure for fulfilling their bellies, right? But the planning of government will be there to do more investment, so that in the future the economy can sustain so large population. So whether the income is high or not is not dependent on the level of investment in case of autonomous investment, right? And this type of investment is mainly done by government, right? Because government has to deal with each and every situation that the society has to face in future, and the society currently is facing. All right, so if there is change in technology, the economy will do higher level of investment no matter whether the national income is greater or less, right? So that's why autonomous investment is independent of the level of income, right? Autonomous is independent and induced is dependent. Okay, this is done by private sector and autonomous is done by public sector. All right, then we have the next component, the third component. It is government demand or purchase. Now what is this government demand or purchase? Yes, one more thing before that I wanted to tell you. Before government demand and purchase, I told you over here about private investment, induced investment and autonomous investment. Also remember that according to Keynes, private investment in an economy depends upon two factors, okay, and they are marginal efficiency of capital, that means expected rate of return on new investment, and the rate of interest. So the private individuals will invest, okay, only when the marginal efficiency of capital, right, that is MEC, that is expected rate of return on new investment, are higher than the rate of interest that they are paying on loans. Okay, so the private investment, okay, the induced investment depends on these two factors. They will do investment only when private people will do investment only when the marginal efficiency of capital is greater than in the rate of interest, right? Whereas government can do investment even when the rate of interest is higher, because they know that investment is more important, right? So the entrepreneurs compare the rate of interest they have to pay on loans, on investment, right, and the expected rate of profit, that is marginal efficiency of capital. So these are two important factors that determine private investment, private induced investment. Okay, then we have government demand or purchase, right? So government do it for public consumption and public investment. You all know that governments are welfare state whose main objective is to increase the economic welfare of its people, right? So investment made by the government in construction of roads, schools, public buildings, hospitals, houses for the weaker section of society, right, has no link with creation of profitability or the rate of interest, but it is just for the welfare of people. So government demand also depends upon basic needs of economy, such as maintenance of law and order, defense needs, provision of infrastructure, and other social and economic factors. I hope that all these three factors are clear to you. Finally, we have net exports, and net exports is simply exports minus imports. Okay, so whatever we are exporting minus whatever we are importing will give you net exports. It is also a very important component. Why it is a very important component? It is very important for an economy because it reflects the foreign demand for goods and services of a country, right? And if exports of a country are more than its imports, then aggregate demand will automatically increase to the extent of difference between exports and imports, and vice versa is also true. So exports and imports of our country depends upon several factors like foreign exchange rate, terms of trade, relative prices of goods, foreign trade policy of government, etc. And in most of the countries, this component of net export of aggregate demand does not have much significance, as it constitutes only a small fraction of aggregate demand. So if the goods are cheaper in our country, automatically the aggregate demand of our country will increase, because foreign countries will also want that good from our country, since it is cheaper in our country as compared to the foreign nations. Okay, I hope this is clear to you. So the components of aggregate demand are clear to you. Equationally, you can write it like this: AD is equal to C plus I, where C is total consumption and I is total investment. And further elaborating it, you can write all these components of aggregate demand as private consumption expenditure. There, please explicitly mention that it is the consumption that is done by household, and it depends upon national income and propensity to consume. After that, in private investment, kindly mention induced as well as autonomous investment, and write that induced investment is done by private sector. It is dependent upon level of income, right? That's why the graph is upward sloping. Whereas in autonomous investment, it is done by government. It is independent of level of income. That's why the curve is straight line. Then I told you that induced investment depends upon two things: marginal efficiency of capital and rate of interest. Whereas government have to do such investment as well where the rate of interest is more, but in public welfare they have to do such investment, right? After that, I told you about government demand or purchase, where I told you that for public consumption as well as public investment as a welfare state, government has to do demand as well as purchase. After that, we discussed net exports, which is simply exports minus imports, right? So mention all these things. Now you know all these things, we can easily draw the graph as well as the schedule. So let's see first the schedule of aggregate demand, right? So here you can see the first part is showing you the income, then we have consumption, then investment, and after that aggregate demand as a sum of consumption and investment, right? Here you can see that income initially is 0, right? Then when you started earning it was 100, after that there was an increment, then it became 200, then it is increasing, right? After that it is increasing, right? So here I have shown that income is increasing by 100, right? Whereas consumption first is 100 initially, after that it is increasing by 50-50, right? 50-50 it is increasing at every steps, it is increasing by 50. And investment throughout is same, because here we are assuming investment to be autonomous investment, right? So here why income initially is 0 and still consumption is 100, because we cannot live without consuming anything, okay? Suppose you get one job in Delhi and you are from let's say you are from Dehradun, right? So you have to move from Dehradun to Delhi, right? You have to buy a room on rent, then you have to incur some transportation charges, and various other things are also required for you to do, all right? So in order to move from Dehradun to Delhi, initially you require some money, because you cannot live without consuming. For 1 month you have to consume with your own money, because you will get salary after giving services of 1 month only, okay? You will get your income. Before that you have to do consumption by your past savings. That's why initially your consumption is not 0 but 100, because you are doing your consumption from your past savings, okay? Consumption cannot be 0, because we people need several things for consuming and we cannot live without consumption. That's why initially you can see your consumption is higher than income. Now see, after 1 month when you get your income, right, after that you will do some expenditure automatically. Here your expenditure on consumption will be higher. Why I said that it will be higher? Because now you have your own income. Earlier you were selectively consuming things, right? Because your savings were limited, but now you have earned your income, so you can do more consumption, and you require several things initially, right? Initially the cost of settling at some places higher, because initially people don't have much clothes, right? These school children and the children who are just studying in colleges, are just doing their studies, have very less clothes, right? So when they move to job they require a lot of clothing, right? As well as they require various things for settling, like a gas stove, and then various other things are also required, some furniture, bed sheet, curtains, etc. All these things are required. So initially the cost of your living will be higher, right? Your consumption will be more than your income. You will still consume from your past savings somewhat you will use your income. Then there will be a point where you will manage to balance your income and your consumption. You will say that I am consuming very much and I have to control my consumption as per my income. And after that, when all your basic necessities are fulfilled, you will not buy clothes very much forever. Initially you buy a large amount, after that you buy a very small amount, right? Because initially you don't have much of it, but initially when you buy more, then at subsequent level you buy very less of it. That's why your income become higher than your consumption, okay? You have more income, but your consumption is less than that, okay? Your consumption increases, but the level of increase in your income is greater than the level of increase in your consumption, because you will not buy curtains, you will not buy your bed sheet daily, right, per month, right? Buying all these things in a year is enough, okay? Two set of curtains and 3 to 4 bed sheets for a year is enough, I guess, right? So that's why your consumption here, you can see, becomes less and your income becomes more. That's why here I have taken a very practical example for you which you can relate, okay? With which there are some reasons, okay, supporting that. So initially consumption is greater than income, okay, but after some point of time, when basic needs are fulfilled, consumption lags behind income, and at zero level of income, consumption is done through past savings, okay? So in the beginning, saving is negative, right? What is saving? See, a part of your income is used in consumption, okay, and a part is used as savings, right? So your savings here will be negative because you're using everything from your savings, since income is not there. After that, here also your savings will be negative. So initially your savings will be negative. At this point you will be having zero savings, but when your income will become larger than your consumption, then automatically your savings will become positive, right? Aggregate investment expenditure of the economy has been taken here as autonomous investment. That's why it is constant. And by adding this consumption and investment together, we get aggregate demand. So 100 plus 100, 200, 150 plus 100 is 250, 200 plus 100, 300. So by adding them together, we get aggregate demand. Now let's see how we can make the curve of aggregate demand by knowing uh, by knowing the consumption curve as well as the investment curve. So I guess from this it is very clear to you that consumption initially cannot be zero. So initially also at zero level of income as well, your consumption will be at some point, okay, above the origin. It won't be over here, it will be like this or somewhere around here, and your consumption will keep on increasing like this. All right, so here you can see initially it was 100 and then it became 150 over here, and then it is 200, so it is increasing like this. So this is your consumption curve. From here you can notice. Then investment also, here you can notice investment is starting from 100 and it is a straight line. So investment is this, it is starting from 100, right? So this is investment curve. When you will add consumption and investment together, you will find your aggregate demand curve like this. All right, so here you can see, let's make it properly, right? This is your point of origin, here is your x-axis, here is your y-axis. The x-axis is showing you income, all right, and the y-axis is showing you aggregate expenditure or aggregate demand, right? So first of all, here is your investment. You can see it is 100 all around. So here is your investment 100, and then here you can see your consumption, which is increasing and starting with 100. So initially it is over here, then it is somewhere here 150, then it is 200, so it is increasing. So your consumption curve is like this. So this is your consumption curve, right? This is your investment curve, okay? And then adding consumption and investment together gives you aggregate demand curve, okay? So if you will add 100, this is 100, right? Consumption over here at zero level is 100 and your investment is also 100. So if you will add both of them together, you will get 200, right? After that, if you will add both of them together, your consumption is 150 and your investment is 100, then you will get 250, right? Like this. And then if you will add 100 over here, you will get like this. So it will be just parallel to your consumption curve. Your aggregate demand curve will be parallel to consumption curve, because the difference between them all over is same, that is of 100, because autonomous investment was 100 at all the level, and the difference between these two is your investment. Is that clear? That's why they will be parallel. So I hope that this is clear to you how you can draw your aggregate demand curve, right? So first just draw investment, after that draw your consumption curve, and then add these two curves together to get aggregate demand curve. And please don't mention to forget to mention the curve names as well as the name of the axis and what you are showing on these axes. So here I am showing income and over here I am showing aggregate demand. So don't forget to mention all these things because they also carry value points, right? So this is clear to you. Now after this, one more question can be there in your mind, that aggregate this consumption and investment are always same at first level, right? Will they always start like this? It is not necessary, right? If your consumption initially is suppose 50, okay, and your investment is 100, then it can be like this is your investment curve and this is your consumption curve. It can be like this, then this type of curve will be there, okay. And if your investment is higher, suppose is lower, suppose it is just 20, then what type of curve will be there? This will be your investment curve, this will be your consumption curve, and somewhere over here will be your aggregate demand curve. So it depends what the investment is, what the consumption is, then you have to reach at aggregate demand curve. So it is better that if you first make a schedule and after that you plot it over a graph, right? So that will be better. But in your examination, as you have very less time and you have to attempt too many questions, so if they are asking for curve only, then please draw only curve. No need to do schedule as well, because there you have very less time, right? But if they want schedule as well, then please draw it. And if you think you have time, then don't forget to draw the schedule, because it is very easy. And remember this, because if you remember one example, you won't face any problem in your examination, right? You know logically why all the things are going like that, but in that situation also, practicing it a lot many times, practicing one example that you can keep handy with you all the times is extremely important, because in examination you have some questions which are very high order thinking questions which require some time, okay, which you first need to understand, which you first need to know what they are asking to you, okay. And they are a bit complicated, but the static part is very easy, so please be prepared with static part very well. Automatically you will be able to do HOTS very well as well, okay. So it will be better if you remember this schedule, because then you will be able to do graph as well as everything in a very well way, okay. So now let's move. Here you can see I have drawn everything properly, so you can take a screenshot of this, mention everything like I have mentioned in this graph, and if possible then please mention everything. Please explain this graph in 2 or 3 lines, okay, what AD is reflecting, what C is reflecting, what I is reflecting, okay, and everything that you have shown over here. Now one thing also that you should know, that the consumption at 0 unit, okay, here at 0 level of income, the consumption over here is called autonomous consumption, and it is represented by C bar, okay, the symbol C bar, right? So always remember, autonomous consumption is a consumption at 0 level of income. At 0 level of income, your consumption is called autonomous consumption, and it is represented by C bar. It is extremely important. You will know about its significance when we will do numericals relating to it, okay. But for now, remember just all these things that I have told you till now. Now let's move to the next part, that is aggregate supply. So aggregate supply refer to the money value of goods and services that all the producers are willing to supply in an economy in a given period of time, okay. So whatever goods and services the producers want to supply, they are willing to supply in a given period is an accounting year, okay, is called aggregate supply, right? Or in other words, you can say it is a total value of output that is available for purchase by the economy during a given period, okay, because only that will be available for purchase what the producers will be willing to sale, okay. Other things will not be available for purchase. That's why, in other words, you can simplify it like this, okay. It is nothing but the national income of the country. Here I have said that aggregate supply is nothing but NY is national income of the country. Sometimes in the question they mention NY as national income, sometimes NI. So remember, whether it is NY or NI, they are referring to national income only in the question, right? So aggregate supply is equal to national income. Why now? See, in physical terms, the aggregate supply means total output of goods and services, right, that is produced in an economy. We are saying that aggregate supply is whatever is produced by the producers in an economy. All those goods and services are aggregate supply, right? And the producer of these goods and services must get a minimum price for sale of their services as well as for the sale of their goods. So see, aggregate supply, we are saying aggregate supply is nothing but the goods and services that the suppliers are supplying, okay? And for these goods and services, the suppliers must get some money, okay? They must get paid for it. All right, so it is clear to you till here, right, that the producers of these goods as well as services must get a minimum price for the sale of their output to cover the cost, okay? So if they do not get a minimum price, they will not produce at all. That's why giving them money is necessary, right? And the cost of production is what they have to pay out of different factors of production. Now when they will get money, the industry will get money, they will give this money to various factors of production, okay? Land, labor, capital and entrepreneur, they will pay this money to all of them, they will distribute among all of them. And you know that the factors of payment get compensation of employees, operating surplus plus mixed income of self-employed. You know all these things from the chapter national income. There I told you that factor of payment get paid in the form of compensation of employees, operating surplus and mixed income of self-employed. All right, so the cost of production is what they have to pay out of different factors of production in form of rent, wages, interest and profit, and the sum of total factor payment, that is rent, wages, investment, profit, interest, etc. in economy is nothing but what? NNP at factor cost. All right, so and what is national income? National income is also NNP at factor cost. Hence we can say that aggregate supply and national income are equal. For the sake of clarity, I am repeating it once more. See, aggregate supply is whatever the goods and services the firms are supplying in the economy, and they will automatically, the firms want some money for it. Why? Because they will pay this money to various factors of production, and the various factors of production get paid in the form of compensation of employees, operating surplus, mixed income of self-employed and NFIA, okay? That is net factor income from abroad, because firms take some services from abroad as well, right? Because there are something that are not available in our country, okay, and there are something which are not available in abroad, and the sum of all these four things, that is compensation of employees, operating surplus, mixed income of self-employed and NFI, is nothing but NNP at factor cost, right? And national income is also nothing but NNP at factor cost. That's why I said that aggregate supply and national income means the same thing, okay? So this question can be asked, but till now I didn't find any question like that in CBSE. But it depends upon your destiny which type of question paper it can be. But you should remember this, okay, for making a strong base in economics. So remember, aggregate supply is the money value of goods and services that all producers are willing to supply in an economy in a given period of time, okay? And national income and aggregate supply are just the same thing. Both are NNP at factor cost, okay? So I hope this is clear to you. So let's come to the major components of aggregate supply. So a major part of national income, that is aggregate supply. Now I can interchangeably use national income for aggregate supply or aggregate supply for national income, because both of these things are same. I just explained it to you how, right? So I can say that a major part of national income is spent on consumption and the rest is saved, right? So we can say that aggregate supply or national income is equal to consumption plus saving, right? So national income or aggregate supply is the sum total of consumption expenditure and saving. So symbolically AS is equal to C plus S, okay? So aggregate supply curve is nothing but the sum of consumption curve as well as your saving curve, right? And always remember that the curve of aggregate supply is always at the angle of 45 degree. Now why so? You will get to know when we will do the schedule of aggregate supply. So let's move to the schedule of aggregate supply, and then we will draw the curve of aggregate supply, and there I will tell you that why it is always at the angle of 45 degree. I am telling this to you because it is extremely important, because in some questions some curves will be given to you and others won't be given to you. So in those cases it is extremely important for you to know that aggregate supply curve is of 45 degree. Some children while doing that question do not draw aggregate supply curve of exactly 45 degree, but it is important to draw that. Okay, when we'll do that type of question, I will tell you what is its significance, but for now just remember that aggregate supply curve is a 45 degree line originating from origin. Now let's move to its schedule. Okay, here you can see in the first part I have shown income, then consumption, then saving, and here we have aggregate supply, which is the sum of consumption and saving. Right, earlier I told you that income is either used for consumption or it is used for saving, right? So if you have to find saving, what you will do, saving will be equal to income minus consumption, right? You can do it like this. So I'm taking the same numbers that I have taken earlier. Here your income is increasing by 100, right? And here you can see that the rate of increase of income is constant at every point. And you know that national income and aggregate supply are same things. It will be proved to you from this curve as well. Here you can see the numbers that I have written over here are exactly same which are there of aggregate supply. Here you can see all the numbers of income as well as aggregate supply are exactly same. In the first part it is 0, here also it is 0, then 100, here too it is 100, then 200, then here also it is 200. How it is so? You already know it, but numerically as well I will tell you the same thing. So here you can see that your income is rising at a constant rate, right? So your aggregate supply is also increasing at a constant level. That's why your income curve is always at a 45 degree angle, showing that the rate of increase is constant, right? It is increasing at a constant rate, hence it is a 45 degree line. There are other reasons as well, but for now at a primary level of understanding this subject, remember just this assumption that Keynesian theory is assuming that income is rising at a constant level. That's why this curve is shown as a 45 degree curve, right? Is that clear? Now see, over here you can see that your consumption is also same, it is increasing by 50, and I have found savings by subtracting income from consumption. Okay, this is income and this is consumption. So 0 minus 100 is equal to minus 100, then 100 minus 150 is minus 50, 200 minus 200 is 0, and then 300 minus 250 is 50, 400 minus 300 is 100, 500 minus 350 is 150, and 600 minus 400 is 200. So we can get savings by subtracting consumption from income. Alright, and once we have savings as well as consumption, then automatically we can find aggregate supply by adding that. So 100 plus minus 100 is 0, then 150 plus minus 50 is 100, then 200 minus 200 plus 0 is 200, and then 250 plus 50 will be 300, 300 plus 100 will be 400, and then 350 plus 150 will be 500, and 400 plus 200 will be 600. So you can see what we get as aggregate supply by adding consumption and saving is exactly same as our income. All right, here you can see this, right? So this is clear to you. I hope this entire table is clear to you, right? So here you can see that income is consumption plus saving, and aggregate supply is also consumption plus saving. Okay, so both are same things. Okay, done with it. Now let's draw the graph. Okay, so here first of all you have to mention the axis. This is x-axis, this is y-axis. X-axis is showing you income, y-axis is showing you consumption and saving. Okay, that is aggregate supply, which is the sum of consumption and saving. So I told you that it will be a 45 degree line. It is not exactly 45, but I have drawn it by estimation. A 45 degree line originating from origin, right? And your aggregate supply is a sum of consumption and saving. Write everything as I have mentioned over here. You can mention aggregate supply over this curve as well. Alright, so I hope this is clear to you. Now you can ask me, where is your consumption curve and where is the saving curve? So let's do that as well. Let's draw everything over here. Okay, so this is point of origin, this is x-axis and this is y-axis. Initially you can see saving is negative. Okay, here is a saving. So saving is minus 100, so saving is starting from here. And consumption is starting from here, 100. Okay, and income, that is aggregate supply, is starting from here. Okay, so your this curve is, your consumption curve is like this, is going like this. Your income curve is going like this, because at one point they are equal. Income and consumption are equal, that is income and aggregate supply are equal at one point. All right, like this. And at that point your savings are 0. Okay, so here you can see at this point your savings are 0, so it will be just touching this line. So then if I'll just draw it like this, then I'll get the saving curve, this is consumption curve, and this is income curve. Okay, or the aggregate supply curve. So, and this is always at the angle of 45 degree, you know this. Okay, so in your exam, in your board exam, this question is usually asked. Last year also this question was asked, so it is extremely important, and in most of your past year papers you will find this question. Okay, so they will give you the autonomous consumption. Okay, suppose they have given that autonomous consumption is 100. Okay, and then they will tell you to find, they will ask you to find your saving curve, that find your saving curve then. Okay, then what you will do, how you will find your saving curve, you will do the same thing. You know that income curve is always 45 degree, so here put your D over here and then draw a curve of 45 degree. That is very simple. And after drawing it, you know autonomous consumption and autonomous saving are always equal. Initially you can see that consumption is 100. If consumption is 100, then automatically your savings will be minus 100. Okay, so your autonomous consumption and autonomous saving are just equal. The difference is that consumption is above the origin and saving is below the origin. Saving is negative, right? Because over here income is 0. So if this autonomous consumption, that is at 0 level of income, if autonomous consumption is 100, it means this point is 100. So your consumption curve will be like this. All right, and then in the question your consumption curve will be given to you, and then you have to find the saving curve. So just move it till origin, because you know when consumption is equal to your aggregate supply, or when consumption is equal to your income, at that point your savings are just 0. Okay, so you know that the savings will be 0 at this point. Now you also know that the autonomous saving are minus 100. Okay, so it will start from here. So now you can easily draw your saving curve by joining these points like this. This will be your saving curve. And write all the steps properly. Why you have done it, write it clearly. You will get full marks in this question. Okay, I hope this is clear to you, how we have to do it, and how to draw aggregate supply curve is also clear to you. 45 degree from origin is your aggregate supply curve or your national income curve. Alright, now let's move to the next topic. Here you can see I have clearly mentioned over here, so you can take a screenshot of it. Make your curve like this, and if possible explain it in 2 or 3 lines. Okay, we are done with aggregate demand, we are done with aggregate supply. Now comes the point to determine equilibrium. Okay, by combining both these components together. So determination of equilibrium level of income, output and employment is done by 2 methods. The first is consumption and investment approach, and the second is saving and investment approach. So let's do both of these approaches fastly, okay, quickly. And they are often asked in the examination, right? They are separately asked or both are asked together. These are very important. If you will go through the past year papers, you will see that one question from this topic is always there. That's why it is extremely important. From entire equilibrium part or from a part of it, the question will definitely be there, right? So let's see consumption and investment approach first. So according to this approach, the equilibrium level of income is determined at a point where aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal. Okay, the point where your AD, aggregate demand, is equal to aggregate supply gives equilibrium. Okay, so let's see, you all know, let's draw it and draw the curve, and we will see everything through the curve. Okay, this is your x-axis, this is point of origin, this is y-axis. X-axis is showing national income and your y-axis is showing aggregate demand as well as aggregate supply. All right, and then over here, you know, your aggregate supply curve always starts from origin and it is at the angle of 45 degree. You know this, right? So this is your aggregate supply curve, all right, or your national income curve. After that, you also know that your aggregate demand curve is somewhat like this. Okay, and your aggregate demand is the sum of consumption plus investment. Okay, so this point where your aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal, this point is a point of equilibrium. Okay, and the demand at this point, the aggregate demand at this point, is called effective demand. I told you earlier, right, that the demand at the point of equilibrium where aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal is called effective demand. Okay, so here you can see that the AD over here is effective demand. Okay, below this point you can see what is happening in this part, what is happening over here, what is the situation over here. Over here you can see that your aggregate demand is greater, right, than aggregate supply. Okay, and what is happening over here, over this part, what is the situation over here? You can see that your aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply, that is aggregate supply is more but aggregate demand is less, and at this point of equilibrium both aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal. All right, so I hope this is clear to you how to determine your equilibrium by consumption and investment approach. Just draw aggregate demand curve and aggregate supply curve together. This is aggregate supply curve, this is aggregate demand curve. When you will draw it together, you will get the point of equilibrium where both of them are equal. Don't forget to mention the curves, what they are representing, and then your axis, what your axis are showing. Okay, so I hope this is clear to you. Now let's see what happens when equilibrium is not there. What happens in the situation where aggregate demand is greater than aggregate supply, and what happens when aggregate demand is less than your aggregate supply. I told you, right, that at this point both are equal, but over here what is happening? Your aggregate demand is greater than your aggregate supply, right? Over here aggregate demand is greater than aggregate supply, and over here your aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. Right, now we will see that how the various forces force it to reach at equilibrium. Okay, so let's see it. Okay, let's have a look at it. Before that, here you can see everything through a schedule. Whatever we discussed, I told you that equilibrium is a point at which aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal. So here you can see aggregate demand and aggregate supply both are 400 at this point. Okay, so at the level of income, when income is 400, aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal, hence this is a point of equilibrium. Okay, by curve also I have shown it to you. Okay, and you can see before that what is happening, your aggregate demand is greater than your aggregate supply, and after that what is happening, your aggregate supply is greater than your aggregate demand, and at the point of equilibrium both are equal. Okay, so let's see what happens when aggregate demand is greater than aggregate supply, and what happens when aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. Right, so if aggregate demand will be more than the aggregate supply, automatically there will be more profits to the producers, because demand of their product in the market is very much. Okay, so demand for the of the economy is very high, so it is very profitable for the producers. As a result of that, what they will do, they will increase their employment of factors of production, they will employ more factors of production, so employment will increase as a result of that. Okay, and also output will increase because these factors of production will produce more output. Okay, so output will also increase, as a result of which your income will also increase. Why income will also increase? Income will increase because these factors of payment that the firm is employing in order to meet this excess demand, okay, is what is helping to increase the level of national income, because they are also earning something. Okay, that's why whenever your aggregate demand is greater than aggregate supply in the economy, then it means that there will be more profits to the producers, as a result of which the producers will increase their employment, which in turn will help in increasing output, which in turn will help in increasing income, as a result of which what will happen, aggregate demand and aggregate supply will become equal. Okay, these things will keep on rising till both of them become equal. All right, so whenever the question asks you that what happens in the case of excess demand, or in the case when aggregate demand is greater than aggregate supply, then just mention it, that it means that the profits to the producers will increase, as a result of which employment will also increase, so output will also increase, so income will also increase till the level when aggregate demand become equal to aggregate supply. Now coming to the second thing, when aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply, everything just opposite to it will happen. Producers will suffer losses, right? There will be losses to the producers, so they will decrease the employment of factor of production. Okay, they will employ less factors of production because they don't want so much factors of production, since their product is not demanded by the people. Supply is excess and the demand is less, the aggregate demand in the economy is less. As a result of fall in employment, what will happen, output will also decrease, so the income in the economy will also fall, national income will also fall, till the point when aggregate demand becomes equal to aggregate supply. Okay, so is that clear? I hope that both these situations are clear. Please don't forget to mention all the key points. So in this situation, mention all the four things. First, profit will increase to the producers, then employment will increase, output will increase, income will increase till AD become equal to AS. And over here, just opposite to it, producers will suffer loss, then employment will decrease, output will decrease, and automatically national income will fall till aggregate demand becomes equal to aggregate supply. All right, now let's move to the next approach. It is saving and investment approach. So in this, according to this, the equilibrium level of income is determined at a point where ex ante saving and ex ante investment are equal. Okay, now what does it mean? It means, that aggregate demand equals aggregate supply means that the component of aggregate demand, that is consumption, plus investment are equal to the components of aggregate supply, that is consumption plus saving, right? So if we will remove consumption from both the sides, what we get, that investment should be equal to savings, right? So this approach, saving and investment approach, tells the same thing, that for finding equilibrium, these two things should be equal. Okay, so here you can see in this schedule that over here the savings and income are just equal. Saving is 100 and income is also 100, both are equal. Here it is 100 and here it is also 100, and both aggregate demand and aggregate supply are also equal, 400 because they have common thing, that is consumption. The only different thing is investment and saving, okay, which we are comparing, and at the point of equilibrium they are also equal. All right, so this is a point of equilibrium. So according to this approach, whenever the ex ante investment is equal to ex ante saving, there will be equilibrium. All right, so I hope this is clear to you. Now let's see it through and through the graph. Okay, then it will become much more clearer to us. So I'll draw its graph over here only, right, because there is no space. So firstly, I'll mention all the axes. This is your x-axis, which is representing income, and this is your y-axis, which is representing saving and investment curve, right? So your saving curve starts with negative. Here it is like this, and at this point consumption curve is just crossing it. Consumption curve is not required, so we won't draw it. Investment curve is like this, okay, straight line. This is your saving curve, this is your investment curve. So the point where saving and investment are equal is giving you the point of equilibrium. So here this is a point of equilibrium, and the part, right, this part where this part that is before the equilibrium, what is happening, your here you can see your investment is greater than your savings over here, right? And at this part, in this part, you can see that your savings are greater than your investment. All right, so I hope this is clear to you. And over here your savings are zero. At this is your autonomous saving, okay, this is your from this from this origin, this is your autonomous saving, and here you have this savings, and then positive saving starts, and after that your savings are larger than your investment. All right, so let's see what happens in this situation when your savings are less than investment, and what happens when your savings are more than your investment, because equilibrium is where savings are equal to investment. So you have to draw your curve like this, very neat and clean, right? First you have to mention your both axes, then what you are showing on both the axes, then draw the curve, mention equilibrium, okay, and everything. So see, there is a strategy of making curves, okay, and that is called equilibrium, okay, and then equilibrium, and then your curves EC, and then your axis ECA, okay. So this is a strategy for doing your curves, okay. Whenever you draw a curve, never forget ECA, that is, you have to mention equilibrium, you have to mention the curve names, and then you have to mention the axis, that what you are showing on both the axis, okay. Axis doesn't mean just mentioning x y, okay. You can mention x y, but along with that you have to mention what you are showing. As here I have mentioned income, over here I have mentioned saving and investment. Like this you have to mention the things. So remember, the strategy for drawing curves is ECA, equilibrium, then your curves, and your axis. Mention all these things, your labeling will be done, okay. So I hope this is clear to you. Now let's see what happens when your saving is greater than investment, and what happens if your savings are less than your investment, okay. So if in the economy saving is greater than investment, it simply means saving is a component of aggregate, it is a component of aggregate supply, okay, and investment is a component of aggregate demand. It means aggregate supply is greater than aggregate demand, or you can simply say aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply, okay. So as a result of it, inventory increases. Inventory means stock will increase, right, because their output won't be sold out, because demand is not there in the economy. That's why the inventory of the producers, the stock of the producers will increase. So the first step is inventory will increase, right, and as a result of which, if their stocks are full, then they will reduce the output. Automatically they will also reduce the employment level, which will in turn reduce the income level, okay. And till what point this income will reduce? Till the point when your planned saving becomes equal to planned investment. As a result, lesser output would be produced for the next year, because already there is much in inventory. All right, so I hope this is clear to you. Whenever saving is greater than investment, aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. So inventory, that is in stock, there is already very much. Inventory increases, output falls, employment and income falls, as a result of which what happens, saving become equal to investment, all right, and less is planned for next year. Now if savings is less and investment is more, so what will happen? Saving is a component of aggregate supply, and investment is a component of aggregate demand, all right. So it means your aggregate demand is greater than your aggregate supply, right? So as a result of which, what will happen? Your inventory will decrease, okay, because everything will be sold out. you have to produce more as a result of this. So there will be increase in output. All right, so they will employ more factors of production, so employment will increase and income will also increase. Till what point? Till the point when your planned saving become equal to planned investment. As a result, the firm will expand their investment and production. What will happen? The firm will expand their investment as well as production. Is that clear? I hope this is clear to you. How this happens. So a question separately asking you what happens when saving is greater than investment can come, or what happens when saving is less than investment can also occur. So you have to be prepared with each and every ball that CBSE throws in front of you. You have to be ready to hit them, right? So I hope all these things are clear to you. That's all for this video. Yes, one more thing I want to tell you. Many people are very much confused while they see the saving and investment, okay, which is a part of what. Although there is nothing such confusing in it, but just remember, just a remembering trick. In aggregate supply, there is S. In saving also there is S. So saving is a part of aggregate supply, and investment, the rest is a part of aggregate demand. Okay. So that's all for this video. In the next video, we will discuss about consumption function and various other things, the left out topics. And then finally, in the next to next video, we will do inflationary and deflationary gap in detail. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to motivate us to make better content. Thank you.